I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
It's like an apprentice show. The Donald responding to the massive outcry, to the comments that he made last night. Take a look if you missed it.
I want to ask you here on the stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad.
Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying.
Now, forget what a Democrat's going to say. Two of Trump's former opponents in the Republican primaries could not disagree with the Donald more. Take a listen to what Marco Rubio and John Kasich had to say.
This election's not being rigged. And I'm explaining to you why it's not being rigged in Florida and why I hope he stops saying that. Why he should stop saying that. We have 67 counties in this state, each of which conduct their own elections. I promise you there is not a 67-county conspiracy to rig this election.
To say that elections are rigged and all these votes are stolen, that's like saying we never landed on the moon, frankly. That's how silly it is.
Now, I want you to listen next to what the Ohio Secretary of State, he's a Republican and a Trump supporter, his job to make sure there's fair elections, and again, you heard from Ohio, you've heard from Florida, and this from the Secretary of State, again here from the state of Ohio.
I can reassure Donald Trump I am in charge of elections in Ohio, and they're not going to be rigged. I'll make sure of that. We have a bipartisan system of elections. Frankly, it's the only place you can find Democrats and Republicans working cooperatively together.
Okay, let me bring in our panel right now. We got Nan Hayworth, former Republican Congresswoman from New York, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, who, by the way, we'll play a little clip of him and the Donald from a few years ago. Jerry McKinstry joins us again. He's managing director of the November Team, a Republican-leaning political consulting group. All right, we'll get to the headline that came out of that debate here. But I had a former Republican and a Democratic congressman sitting here on the set. Either draw or she wins. Jerry, I'll start with you. I haven't heard anybody yet say that the Donald got the better of the exchange last night overall.
You know, I think some of his supporters say he got the better, but I think Hillary Clinton was a clear winner. I mean, he did not advance his case. I don't think he expanded his base. This is really what he has to do. So I definitely say, you know, Hillary Clinton had to go into this. She had to be safe and good, and I think she was better than that.
Dom?
She definitely won, and I'm saying that objectively because Trump needed to score points. He needed to do something to change the dynamics of the race, and he did not. In fact, she was feisty. She stood up to him, and in fact, he hurt himself. He thinks it's cute, the lead-in that you did about, you know, I'm not going to tell you if I'll back the winner of this election. But all he did was made that page one across the country rather than the fact that he had a solid performance and he had her on the ropes on some issues.
Yeah.
I would agree that his technique has been the case for all three of these encounters. Left something to be desired. I did feel that he made a lot of excellent points about the way in which Secretary Clinton has behaved in ways that should concern us. I think he made a lot of good points about the way the Clinton Foundation has managed its money,
Okay.
about
the
the way
headline,
she managed her job
the
as Secretary of
headline
State.
that everybody's talking about the rigging of the election, more than disagreeing with what he said, and I assume you're going to fall in line with most national Republicans. I've heard one who sides with him here, including, by the way, Paul Ryan, completely distanced himself from what obviously Trump said, but the danger associated with it. Do you think it's just, oh, it's reckless, or do you think it's dangerous? Because I mentioned with my interview with Cokie Roberts, Laura Ingraham, who's as right as they get in terms of, she said Trump's wrong, he shouldn't say that. Someone tweets back saying, you know what, that's why we got the Second Amendment. If the election's rigged here, that's why I got my gun. We've heard Trump also talk about that and foment some of that going to the line. You're not concerned that this is more than just problematic, that this is reckless and dangerous?
Two thoughts come to mind. One is that Mr. Trump is the symptom, not the disease, if you will. He's representative of a phenomenon. There is a deep-seated and, frankly, in many ways, justifiable cynicism on the part of a lot of American voters. For example, I mean, I, as a political, and I don't consider myself a political professional, but I, as someone who's had some experience in politics, when I was listening to that debate, that comment didn't strike me like lightning the way it did some people. I understand why it did. I do understand that. It's not something I would have said. And I would agree with those who say, look, the overwhelming likelihood is that we will not have any sort of massive voter fraud. I agree. There's massive voter fraud isn't going on. Is a certain amount of voter fraud going on? Yeah, it probably is. But here's the other issue. Here's the deeper phenomenon, which is that people have been given, Americans have been given every reason to be cynical about the way in which political figures like Hillary Clinton.
No. Wait, before you do that, here's the point. Republican and Democrats, you may love or hate Al Gore, but Al Gore got the popular vote. And in one county, in one state, in this entire country, it went south on him. And he made the vote. Wait. And he acknowledged, because of a Supreme Court decision, I accepted and I move on.
Did, right.
And every president or
Donald
every
Trump
challenger
should do
from
the
every
same
party
thing.
says that.
I agree with
And
you.
they
Donald
say
Trump
that for a reason. It's not just tradition. The country has to come together or make an attempt to in the ninth. So to say, well, he's tapping into cynicism, he's done more than that. He has said things, Jerry, I have never, ever heard before, and he doubles and triples down on it. And if God forbid something happens, I don't want to see him putting his hands up and say, well, I never thought it would go that far.
Sure. And he probably will. But if we get back to the rigged statement for a second, my issue with him saying it's rigged is he's conflating issues. When he came up back to talk about why he thinks it's rigged, he talked about the media and he talked about Hillary Clinton. He didn't talk about the electoral system, and I think that's a fundamental flaw in his logic, that he could not prove anything. He said, look, you should have seen what I've seen. I've seen terrible things. But he didn't tell us what he's seen. So I think this whole thing about it being rigged is nonsense. I think that's why guys like John Kasich come out and say these things, Marco Rubio. And I think we're going to sort of move beyond it, hopefully.
But just from a guy who works on this,
yeah,
his daughter, his campaign manager, his running mate say, no, we'll accept it and we'll move on. And he's pressed by that his own family, running mate, and party apparatus and campaign apparatus all says, of course he will. And he says, no, it'll see.
The thing I think we've all seen in this campaign is he does play to his audience, but he doesn't admit failure. And the problem here is he comes out in his rally the next day and he sort of doubles down on it. And I don't see how he can sort of pull back after this, how Donald Trump can pull back. Everybody else plays by different rules. He plays by his own rules, and frankly, I think a lot of people are talking about what the election may very well be over. The problem now isn't Donald Trump per se, it's down ballot.
And that's where I was going next, Jerry. You look at the math, there was a story today, Politico broke, more than 80 some odd House Republicans are being asked to contribute money to other campaigns because of the fear of this wave that they believe is coming November 8th. I don't know how, Dom, at this late date, we got 20 days, 19 days here, how do you extract yourself from the nominee, even if you say, well, I'm not, I'm endorsing kind of, sort of, at this point it's baked in. Everybody always says this, we always talk about this, right, that, the electorate, when they go in, they don't vote party line. Yes, they do. Almost always they do. How, if you're a Republican running right now, if you want nothing to do with Donald Trump, how do you extricate yourself from that?
If you're a Republican, good luck with that. It's as simple as that, Richard, because, normally we hear, I agree with your assessment. The conventional wisdom is that, okay, whatever party's in power for checks and balance, voters will go the other way for checks and balance on the top of the ticket. Nonsense. People either vote Republican for the most part and they go down the line, or in this state, they vote Democrat, and in this case, they may be looking to punish Donald Trump for his behavior by making other Republicans pay for it. So good luck with that. He's your nominee. Swim or drown with him.
Listen, it's not just theory. You heard that from the RNC saying, We're not putting a penny for Trump. We're going to try and keep what we have here. We're going to try and hold as well we can where we're strong. But they're asking other members to write checks for other members' races, and they've even acknowledged that's not traditional in a presidential year.
Every member of Congress, every senator has to run his or her own race. Marco Rubio is in a very tight race in a swing state, hence his whole, fully throated denouncement of any accusations that elections might be rigged. And again, I agree completely with Jerry. There are legitimate issues about the way certain types of behaviors have been prosecuted by the media and by Secretary Clinton and her campaign. But in terms of moving the levers of election, probably not. But Marco Rubio's running in a particular race. He has to do that. Paul Ryan feels he has to do that. It's much nicer. Look, I've been in analogous situations. It's much nicer when everybody can run as a unified ticket. But as a practical matter, we have millions of people in this country.
Let's say you were running this year. You're the Republican nominee in your district, which is a swing district.
Yeah.
Do you do everything you can right now to make sure that when people go in the booth on November 8th, they're not thinking of Donald Trump when they're thinking of Nan Hayworth?
There are millions and millions of people across the country, and there's a very large
I'm
contingent
trying you
of
now.
folks in
Would
our-
you do everything possible
there's
that
a
the people in the
large
Hudson Valley
contingent-
don't think of Trump when they're thinking Nan Hayworth?
There's a large contingent of folks in the Hudson Valley who feel very strongly that Donald Trump is speaking for them. We have to speak to those folks as well. And there are significant, most of what Donald Trump is talking about in terms of issues, in terms of policies, are, as he demonstrated in the debate last night, that's content with which Republicans can
we
by
can
and
debate
large
that one all
agree.
day long here, but I do know that there's a dilemma right now where, yes, 40%, as he says, he can shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and he'll get away with it, okay? Who says that out loud? He does, but he's probably right. But nonetheless, you don't win elections with 40%. You got to get that next 10 or 11%. So to my point, Jerry, that calculation that's being made right now is, if you had to bet, do you think people go like Jeff Flake in Arizona and others to say, I tried to straddle this thing as long as I could. I got to get away from this guy here. He's dragging me down with him. Do you think we see a lot more of that in the next 2.5 weeks or not?
I do think you see more of that the more he sort of speaks and says certain things. But I also think, to Nan's point, that I think a lot of Republicans are going to grab onto some important issues of the economy, taxes, reforming Washington, and voters will listen to that. The challenge they have is getting that word out. They almost have to be in their own districts louder than the noise of Trump.
Good luck.
And it's certainly a challenge, but we're working on campaigns. This is what we have to do: is you get the message out and articulate issues. Because when you get outside of certain city areas and whatnot and media capitals, you have real problems on the ground. You have real issues with people, with jobs,
You're
economy,
100% right, Jerry.
taxes.
But do you believe we're talking Texas being in play? The latest numbers from the Houston Chronicle here. Okay, so we're not talking like crackpots. They got it within 3 points here. Georgia, it's dead even. Georgia, Texas, Arizona, states that never were in play for a Democrat. In the last 9 cycles, they don't even come within 10 points. This time it's different. All right, I want to jump to a break, but when we come back, the handsome man at the end of the table here, yes, Jerry, no, Dominic too. He had an interview with Donald Trump that you almost have to see to believe here. We'll have that and more. Stay with us.